My name's Dale, and I want to welcome you to my channel, Observer of Anomalous Objects. Let me encourage you, if you haven't done it already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Go ahead and hit the like button. That'll really help the channel out a lot. And then also you can help us out by sharing the video, telling people about the channel. It's about 2 years old, and I'm telling you what, we're just starting to get the wind behind our backs. Had some incredible guests. We had Chris Sharp recently. We had Deborah Jordan Cobble, who was the lady from Intruders, Bud Hopkins' book. And so just, I could go on and on and on. So many great guests. And I'm really excited today because we're having Jason Sands with us. And I'd like to read a quick bio of Jason's to give you an idea of who Jason is. Jason Sands is a former U.S. Army serviceman. He was actually a master sergeant in the Air Force and a whistleblower who has publicly described his experiences involving unidentified anomalous phenomena and non-human intelligence. He speaks about these encounters to promote transparency and broader discussions about advanced technologies and their implications for humanity. Sands advocates for greater public awareness and accountability surrounding what he believes has been concealed from the public. And so without any further ado, I'm going to bring the man of the hour up, Mr. Jason Sands. And Jason, I want to start off by thanking you for your service. Appreciate all vets. I'm a vet myself, but really, really appreciate the sacrifices you made. And it's probably a kind of a good entry point to go into. Why don't you give us a little bit of your background, kind of tell us, about your military service there, the 608th,
Sure.
I believe it was.
Yeah, I retired in 2007 after 22 years in the Air Force, like you were saying. Joined in 1985. First job was to fix airplanes. I was a sheet metal troop. And then after the first 3 years of my service, I cross-trained into intelligence. Went quickly to Simbach, Germany, and then my next assignment after that was Nellis, and that's where everything exploded into strangeness. And then after the 3 years in that program, I then became sort of I guess supervisor, manager type, and then they put me into staff jobs, joint staffing. Did a lot of work in Hawaii that I'm very proud of. And then I finished out my last year in 2007 in Florida. That's where my kids and my family wanted to stay because I'd been moving them around all my career. So it was their turn to get to pick. And I've become a government contractor ever since. So I've got a long history and career, contracting work that I've also done with DIA, DHS, Department of Defense, Undersecretary of Defense, staff member at Cybercom, all those kinds of things. So those are all things that I'm very proud of that I got to do. Some I liked more than others, but that's kind of me in a nutshell. Have 6 kids, still married. We're separated right now due to other difficulties. They're not UFO related. This just happens to be, a time of a season, I guess, for our marriage, but we're still hanging in there with our marriage. So that's keeping us steady and we get along. But anyway, other than that, everything's been going smooth. I'm happy down here in Alabama.
Wow.
Just helping out one of my family members right now get on her feet after a really bad time with her marriage as well. So I'm happy to extend a helpful hand to her. So other than that, doing good. Just great time to be here. And I think it's time to start talking again. And it's good to see some of the other voices are speaking up.
Well, we're really, really grateful to have you here. And I'll tell you one thing, you definitely nailed what military life is like. And like I said, even after you get out, is you move a lot. You go see a lot of places. Florida really stuck out for me. Lieutenant Scott, one of my friends, lives there. And my sister, before she passed, she was living in Sarasota. So I don't know how far away that was from you or not.
Yeah. Where was that?
Sarasota.
Yep. I've been down that way. Yep.
I think those were Lou's old stomping grounds as well.
Yes.
Elizondo. And so, well, Why don't you, I mean, you're a lifelong experiencer. Why don't you go ahead and tell us about when you had your first encounter, the first encounter with non-human intelligence? Just tell me when this journey began really for you.
Well, that was childhood. My mother actually saw the beings that helped me. I was born in England. My dad was working at Menwith Hill Station. He and I both kind of share some very strange, how shall I say, mission types. And we when he found out that I had a clearance, he and I actually got to talk a little bit more about things. Anyway, at Menwith Hill is where I was born. So Harrogate is where Menwith Hill is, very close to Harrogate, England. And back then, as a little guy, me and my sister would have to walk about 5 miles back and forth to school. And that was just the way things were done back in the 60s.
Yeah.
So this guy, pedophile, he tried to attack me, and he knocked me in the head with one of those leather cudgels or whatever that has the lead balls in it, and knocked me to the ground. I couldn't move, and I couldn't see, but I could hear everything that was going on around me. And then what I thought was a police officer, or a bobby is what they call them in England. And then this guy just picked him off me, and the guy that was attacking me got really scared and started asking, what the hell are you? What the hell are you? As he was looking at this guy. And he started fading off into the distance and screaming, because he was very afraid. And then his voice just kind of disappeared at one point. And then the person that I thought was a police officer picked me up and asked me, are you okay? And can you walk? And we did. We got to my doorstep because we were just around the corner. Really, it was only like a block from my house when this attack happened. So this guy must have had his eye on me for a while. But anyway, we got to the doorstep, and I tell the gentleman, who I thought was a police officer, I'm blind, I can't see. You're gonna have to help me, And he touched the side of my temple, and all of a sudden my vision started coming back.
Wow.
It was a bit blurry at first, but then as everything cleared up, I could see he was about a 5 foot tall guy, platinum blonde hair, blue eyes, a grayish silver kind of jumper type suit with a blue sash around his waist. And there's another guy there too that was standing next to him. He looked very similar. Could have been twin brothers, but not identical, not identical twins, but very, what's the same height, same hair color, same eyes, all that stuff. And so he usually the door is locked. I have to get the key out, but he just opened the door like it was open already. And I stepped into the threshold, and I turned around to thank him. And in that instant, he was gone. And I looked up and down the street, because where I'm at, you could see straight to the left and to the right, and they were nowhere to be seen. So it was like he just kind of disappeared. But I had such a splitting headache, I just shut the door and went to the couch and started to take a nap until my mom or my nan came home, because sometimes my mother would get there first from her job, or my nana would come in. But anyway, my mother showed up first, and they were concerned because I still had the headache, so they just gave me a cold compress and everything. So she didn't see any of the men that day, but the following day they came back, and that's when she saw them. They knocked on the door. They asked how I was, and she mentioned, that he's still got a nasty bump on his head, but he's okay. And she started thanking them and said, "Come in for tea," but they refused. They're like, "No, we don't have any time to come in for tea." But she was very insistent and walked away and started boiling the water anyway, because that's my mom. She loves to entertain people that she feels are good people, friends that she wants to get to know. But anyway, she comes back out from the kitchen, and they're gone, just like they were with me, because she left the door open thinking they were going to walk in. And so that was the very first time I remember there being beings in my life. And they're very protective. I think I've had people ask me, do you think they're guardian angels or anything else like that? And I'm like, well, I guess you could call them that. I mean, that's kind of the description some people have. I mean, even in the Bible, they describe them as sons of man. or sons of God rather. And, even Abraham, he actually had some in his tent, and then his wife got pregnant because they blessed him.
Right.
So there's all these stories, but they ate lunch with him. He actually had fed them and everything. So they're like, what I encountered, they looked like, I knew they were different, but they very much looked like us. So yeah, take it or leave it. They could be guardian angels, they could be guides, they could just be N.H.I. that are kind and protective. All those sorts of things. But ever since that encounter, it's been following me around all my life. I've had several other encounters.
Well, let me ask a couple questions. You said they were blonde-haired and blue-eyed, or at least the one that picked you up and carried you. Have you ever thought about whether that was a Nordic or not?
I called them Nordics, but other people have tried to correct me. But I don't think anybody really knows what
That's a
one
good
species
point.
looks like or whatever. They look like Nordics. I call them Nordics.
Right.
Yeah, that's who they are to me.
Yeah. Anybody that claims they're an expert in this field, that's probably the last person you should listen to, because there really is so much unknown, and one experience doesn't explain all experiences. And I think that's really, really important. One of the questions that was asked by one of the viewers was, did you have any ringing in your ears, anything like that during that period of time?
No, I just had a very large headache.
Oh, wow.
After
How
getting
long did
hit.
that last?
It lasted most of the first day, and then the next day it was just really tender, where he hit me on the head, because he hit me on this side as well, and that's where the Nordics touched me on this side near that, and that's when my vision came back. I don't know whether that's...
You have any long-term effects from that?
No, nothing like that, no. Not that I could think of anyway. Just it took me, better part of a week to have the swelling go down and just kind of get back to normal.
So what was wrong with the kid that hit you? I never have understood stuff like that. Was he?
Well, he was a pedophile. He was wanting to rape me.
Oh, I missed that part. A pedophile. Wow.
Oh, well, yeah, I didn't describe it.
Oh my goodness. And that really was a rescue. It wasn't just an assault. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. It was pretty heinous, honestly. The guy really.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I'm sorry you had to go through.
He was aiming to do the bad thing to me, but he was stopped, thankfully, by this individual that came and rescued me.
One of the viewers put that maybe you were being monitored or watched, and they stepped in right when they needed to.
Yeah, I've heard that beings like that do not just appear. It's like I've said, it's been happening all throughout my life. It's not the only time they showed up in my life either.
Right.
They showed up another time when I was more like 10 years old, because the first encounter with them, I was in first or second grade, so I was only like 4, 5 years old. Mm-hmm. You may think that's a bit young for being of school age, but in England, they start a year earlier there than they do in America. But anyway, we moved to Fort Devens. After that, some strange stuff happened there as well. And then eventually we ended up in San Jose, California, where we encountered the same two individuals. And my mother, again, encountered them. So we both have, and my sister also, she knows of them as well. Very strange individuals. They showed up all three times that they showed up, or excuse me, all 2 times that they showed up. They were always very helpful and protective.
Wow. Well, let's go ahead and move on to the ones that you've been talked about a lot, where people have not talked about a lot, but where they're big. I guess I want to use the right wording here. The encounters that happened, at Nellis and some of the other places, your military encounters. Now, one thing I'm really intrigued about is I've got a new friend named Hope, and she's having some struggles with being an experiencer, and she has some kind of like a history similar to mine. But she had seen a blue being. And so that one really piques my interest. In fact, I encouraged her to make sure to watch this podcast, because you were going to talk about the blue being. Can you tell us a little bit about the blue being? What year was that? Where did you see it? What were you doing?
Yes. There was just on the cusp of my being in trouble with the legacy program, and I was taken out of the program, but they were still using me to do dirty work.
Let's go ahead and describe that first, and then go into the blue one, so everybody understands the legacy program, what your involvement was, and then we'll move directly into the blue being, if you don't mind.
Right. Well, I've always been a technical electronic systems guy. security. I'm the type of guy that goes out and does the assessments for all the directors and the bases and installations. And then me and my team would go on like two-week missions was the norm, sometimes longer, depending on what the mission was, but mostly 2 weeks long. And then we would come back, write a report and give that to the customers and say, hey, here's your security flaws and vulnerabilities. If you want help, we can help you fix those, or you can fix them on your own. Totally up to you. So that's what I did for a number of years as a normal job. That's what I was doing in Germany before I went to Nellis. So I get to Nellis and still doing that same job. And I think I was taking my 5-level skill level test or getting ready for that. And so I was studying for one of the tests, and I think I surprised a couple of my supervisors because I've got this weird memory where I could, on the volume review exercises in the books that you read to get yourself an upgrade to the next skill level, there's like over 300 questions, and I could memorize them just with one read through and answer them to a 95 to 97 percentile. And on top of that, if you started reading off the question, I could finish the question for you and give you the right answer. Mm-hmm. So I think I surprised some people, and that's when maybe some of the folks started to look at me in the legacy program. And eventually, I ended up in one of those Chevy Blazers that we take to convoy up, and went up there with one of my friends, and I didn't know at the time, but he was already in the legacy program. And we started talking about Dreamland and all that good stuff and UFOs. And he was giggling the whole time. And I kind of bagged on him later on about it, that he was just, I was like, you knew all the time when we were having that conversation before you invited me, didn't you? And he was like, yeah. So I was like, well, anyways, thank you for inviting me. So anyways, pretty soon after I had that drive up range with him, that I got introduced to the other two guys that were like me, that did the telecommunications security stuff as a day job, but then our night job was to go and do this for the program. And we would just kind of take off whenever we were needed. And we get a call on a Friday and have to have your bags packed on that Saturday, take off to McCarran Airport and fly out. And then you take off to like Wright-Patterson or New Mexico, White Sands and all these other places that we used to go to, in Eglin Air Force Base, places like that. So that's when it all started. And then within a few quick months of running these missions with these guys, we accumulated quite a bit of knowledge. Because as you know, you got people like Lazar, Hal Puthoff, Eric Davis, all of them are kind of in stovepipes. They're not able to talk to everybody. You can walk past an office door and never open it because you're not allowed to. For me and the nature of my job and the other three guys that I worked with, we had to listen to everything because we went out. We only had 2 weeks to go, so we would get with the director or the installation commander, whoever it was, and they would give us the phone numbers and everything else that we were to monitor and check. And we'd also be joined by a team of OSI agents that would do the physical security parts and the human intelligence parts. And we would help them as well, and we would pass passwords to them if we found them in our work, because we were doing like like hackers do, or you're looking underneath your keyboard and looking for passwords and stuff. And also people would say things on the telephone that you'd be surprised how often people give away their passwords. So anyway, we worked together and we got a lot of corporate knowledge. We heard a lot of strange stuff, working on a lot of very powerful technologies. A lot of it, when it came to at least the propulsion of these crafts that they were looking at and trying to develop with these technologies, exotic technologies, that most of them revolved around electromagnetism and electricity. And so there was a lot of that spoken of. And we also had our officer that was assigned to the team. He was a thermodynamic nuclear physicist. And sometimes when we were writing our reports, we would need him to come in and review the work with us, to straighten us out and make sure we had all the proper jargon in there, make sure it's all scientifically sound. And the other thing is just that we'd also had other calls that were just mundane, is what I would call it. They were still part of the program, part of reverse engineering, but they were for things like, Russian-made equipment or Chinese-made equipment. And it was obvious when they were working or talking about them because they were able to identify what the piece of equipment was and all that. But what I just told you about is the exotics, what I call the exotic stuff.
Right.
And it was blow your mind. I mean, because you'd have one group of scientists that were working on like known enemy equipment, and they weren't having as much frustration. And it seemed like they had more freedom to talk amongst themselves. But when it came to this exotic material, these scientists always were very frustrated, very controlled, very stovepiped, and they just, just like Lazar had said, he was just literally handed stuff and said, "Here, figure it out."
Wow.
So that's how I got started on all of that. And eventually we went down to White Sands, and this is where I got excommunicated from the program.
Okay, so how long was that from the point that you started?
3 years.
About 3 years. Okay.
Yeah, about 3 years. So anyway, I wanted to take my kids to the zoo because the other guys, they like to go out and do other things that I wasn't all that interested in. But, I'd just been newly married, because I started the program single, and then I got married while I was in the program. And I had 2 children at the time. After 3 years, I had 2 children. And then, anyway, I just wanted them to come over the weekend, so I had them come down, and they found out about it. They saw my wife and kids, and they're like, "What on earth are you doing?" And they got a chance to talk to me. They're like, "You can't do this." Really
Wow.
pissed off. I mean, I thought they were really getting bad about it. And I was like thinking in my head, I didn't say anything mean back to them, but I just thought, man, if I can't have a wife and kids, screw this. I'm not, as cool as this is, I don't care, So I let them do their thing. And then we went up to Indian Springs a couple of weeks or a week or so later. They took my badge. They told me to stay in the car while they went inside and talked to whomever they wanted to there at Indian Springs.
So that's why they excommunicated you, because you did that?
Yeah, because I took my kids to a zoo. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
It's they run the program just like the Army does. If we wanted you to have a wife and kids, we'd have issued them to you, kind of attitude.
Right. Yeah.
That's
I've heard that.
Yeah. So that's kind of how they treated me, and they really were very serious about it. But then this day at Indian Springs, I realized how serious they were about it, because they all went in. They were gone for a good hour, and they all came out and they had this really like, holy crap look on their face. Like, how do we tell him? Me, that is, who's waiting in the car. So they all get in the car, and it was like, well, how'd it go? And they just said they wanted to kill you, Jason. And I was like, ha ha ha, yeah, that bitch they did. The bitch they really pissed. They're like, no, Jason, they wanted to put a bullet in your head and bury you in the desert. Do you understand that? And I was like, holy crap, you got to be kidding, just for taking my kid. Yeah, like, yeah, shut up. Yeah, we just saved your ass, so believe it or not, but we did. But we'll contact you in about another week or so, and you'll have to do what we say in order to, see your wife and kids again. And then I was reminded of that when they did come get me, and so they took me back up range, and this time it was to the Tonopah range. There's like a S2 area that's sitting next to a big old carpool. It's nowadays, I think the Sandia Labs airstrip is kind of close to it. You can kind of see it from where I was. Anyway, I've never been in that compound the whole time I worked at Nellis Test Range. All the 6 years I was there at Nellis, this was the only time I was allowed in that gate. And they had a hood on me. They put handcuffs on me, and they injected me with something. And I fought like hell. They had a hell of a time keeping me down to get the injection fully into me. Yeah, at one point I couldn't breathe very well because I was breathing heavily after fighting with them while we were in that area. And they actually folded up the bag that they had on my head, and I was able to see my feet and breathe a little bit more easily. And they took me into this little building that's in that fenced in area. And there's a ramp that went down, and I think the whole building just kind of shifted. They pushed a button on the side of the building, and the whole building just kind of slid back and revealed this ramp that went down. And on the left side, I could see where, like I said, I could see my feet, and I could also see the walls on either side. On my left were a set of doors, about 3 or 4 different doors that actually looked like metal, the kind of doors you see in like a prison, that kind of door. But there are 4 of them down the length of this hallway, and at the back end of the hallway, there's a freight elevator that goes down, which takes you to the tunnels. And then on the right, I remember there being some crates and an antenna. It looked like an antenna to me, because I'm used to setting those up too. That's what we had to do when we were up range. But anyway, so they were joined by a security officer, or whatever you want to call him. He was in black, like security officer outfit. So he was not a military guy. He was like a contractor kind of guy.
Yeah, subcontractor.
Yeah. And so they hand me over to this guy, put me into this room, on the left, one of those doors that looked like a prison, and dimly lit. And in the far right-hand corner, I could see this individual with a similar situation, with him being handcuffed and kind of just being held. So the security guy, he gives me a gun and he says, "Kill him." And I was like, "What the F are you talking about?" I'm like, "Kill him?" I'm like, "Who the hell is he?" And he said, "It doesn't matter." He said, "If you want to live, you're going to do this." And I argued back and forth, and finally he went up and he popped him. And I got pissed, because I didn't know what the hell they were doing. And I went over and I grabbed the individual to see if I could help him with medical attention, but my hands were still handcuffed. They thankfully had taken the head cover off, or the bag, or whatever the heck that was, so I could actually see around the room. But anyway, I held on to this individual. But when I got right up on him, I could tell he was not human. It was like holding a kid, like holding a small child. He was like 3-4 foot tall. Had the big eyes and everything else. And sometimes I got to be careful how I talk. I remember this because it gets really emotional. But anyway, he dies. He dies in my arms. And I feel it because he's telepathically talking to me the whole time. I even felt him as I was coming down the ramp. He was terrified. He was angry. He knew they were going to kill him. I felt all of that telepathically coming at me. And then when he passed, that's when I really snapped, and I just the security guy then starts to point the gun at me. I grabbed his arm, broke it with my 2 hands in handcuffs, because you can do that pretty easily. I did have some martial arts training on how to do that. And then I grabbed him by the neck, and I was pretty robust back then. I mean, nothing but muscle. And I grabbed him by the neck, and I was fully intending of twisting his head from his body. That is how pissed off I was. And I held him up against the wall. But he managed, while I was choking the life out of him, he managed to say, "I have a wife and kids." And I released him. And he just ran out of there, coughing and sputtering. And then my friends, I come back out to the door, and my friends are there. And I just said, "What the hell have you guys done to me? What have you freaking done?" And they said, "Well, this is what we're talking about. It's either bullet in the head or you do what they say." They said, "If you don't do what they say, they're going to literally, you're never going to see your wife and kids again." And they said, "We need to take care of this now, or you're going to have to."
Let me ask a question. Let me intersect, because this is sometimes it's hard to distinguish between who's the military and who's the military subcontractors. And a lot of times it seems like the military subcontractors are the really bad ones. They're the ones that don't seem to have anything governing them at all. And so you mentioned the guy in the black uniform. Were these the ones trying to get you to kill this alien, this N.H.I?
Yes, they're the ones.
Wow. So you got to ask the question, honestly, Jason, who's in charge?
I mean,
is the military in charge of the contractors, or is it the other way around? Because the stories I keep hearing is it sounds more like these military contractors, they have nobody controlling them, and they seem to be controlling everyone else. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes. And I think it's not so much that it's done they're mercenaries. Let me put it that way.
Right.
They're just hired mercenaries. They don't care. They know they're committing crimes. They don't care. Some of them actually like to kill and murder people and things. There's another aspect of this that I think the N.H.I are running, which is also part of the entire retrieval program. And that's what I think actually that individual that they wanted to try and meet, that alien that they wanted me to kill, he was one of the ones they captured on a retrieval. And I think he was, since he was so upset, and like I said, telepathically, I could tell how scared he was. He was in survival mode. He knew they were going to kill him. And it was obvious that that retrieval was one of the ones that probably Jake Barber would say, yeah, that was a tricky one because shit happened. They had to kill this N.H.I that was there because of whatever reason. But then I think that since that is going on, the other thing is I know that just on a scientific sense, the N.H.I are part of the laboratory experiments as well, but they control the environment. They will not work on the weapon system itself. They will only help make the testing environment pristine, so that they get a good test, and that's all they're willing to help the humans with. But actually, I even told Congress when I gave my testimony to them that, yeah, they talked about the tall whites coming in, doing their bit in the lab, and then the grays would come in and clean it up after the humans did the test. But the humans were never allowed in there when the N.H.I were in there, the tall whites or the grays. But the grays were treated much like the cleanup crew. And I think that the same thing is going on with the retrievals, is that sometimes the N.H.I have an interest in the retrieval. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes I think the retrieval is from a place that is maybe not part of the group that works with our government. So they may be at odds in some cases, which I think is very much the case because some of the other things that happened after that event, they would, I would be taken, those, how people talk about those paralysis in bed and experiencing the middle, being taken in the middle of the night. That's what they were doing to me. And on some of those missions, I encountered some other N.H.I that were absolutely horrible, horrific, evil feeling beings. And I'm sure.
So you felt like it was a mixture. There's some that were good, and then there's some that were evil. I think that's pretty fair assessment.
Yeah, and I felt telepathically with at least one group of these N.H.I that they sent me on these dirty jobs with to go kill them and exterminate them alongside another set of team members that were there. These sets of beings really thought that they owned our whole solar system. That's what telepathically, while we were there battling with them, that they were like you feel telepathically from them that they looked down upon us. They looked down upon us like we were their slaves, that we were beneath them, that this is theirs, and that who the heck are we to do anything? But we ended up taking them out anyway. And so there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and that's what I'm trying to get a little bit closer to now, is that retrievals doesn't, it's not just a shiny object taken off in a helicopter. There's a lot more going on because you're talking about the beings there. I think James Fox did a really good job on the Varginha case. That's another one where there's actually some search and rescue going on.
Right.
And then the Air Force shows up. So these are well-planned events, and some of them involve other N.H.I searching for their own people, and they are encountered as well. So that's what we have in this mission type that I was in. So the dirty work involves this batch of stuff that literally you can get killed, and that's the only reason I was left not with a bullet in my head and buried in the desert, is because this was like a death sentence unto itself, but I survived.
Right.
So I guess in a way I'm kind of thankful to my friends that were on the team with me, but at the same time,
you wish you never got involved with it at all. I mean, you have to look at it that way. It just sounds like the way you're describing it, Jason, that there's this secret war going on. There really is. And some of the aliens are good, some of them are bad, but we're treating them all the same, right? I mean, the one that they wanted you to kill, you didn't perceive that was an evil alien, right?
No, I did not. I perceived a very afraid alien. Yeah, a person
Like
that was
any
very
human
afraid.
being that would be going through the exact same emotions, knowing that they were going to be killed. You know, whether you're talking
Exactly.
about a Nazi death camp or something like that, it would have to be the exact same emotions. And it's just, I can only imagine. Like I said, I'm not saying all aliens are good. There are some bad aliens, but I can only imagine that when people from other planets or from other galaxies or maybe from other dimensions, when they come to us, it's like going to the zoo to visit a lion or a tiger. You
Yeah.
know, don't put your hand in the cage. You
Yeah.
know, don't interact with them unless you have absolute control over them. You
Yeah.
know, and I don't understand how humans can be. I'm just going to use the word evil.
Well,
You
and
know?
that's just it. There's a root of that inside of, and that's another reason I went to see Congress, is because I know they've harmed Americans
Yeah,
in
well,
this program.
what they tried to do to you, I was going to ask you that. How many
Yes.
bodies are buried in the desert, do you think?
Probably in the tens, if not more, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that was a
Um,
rhetorical question, but yeah, I'm just like the
yeah.
implications of what you said. You're obviously not the only person that ever happened to. We've
Oh,
had
no.
multiple whistleblowers talk about threats. Somebody in one, I think it was the last hearing, they mentioned that somebody had been approached with a gun to try to get them not to speak at the hearing. I'm not sure exactly who that was for
That was
sure.
David Rush. Yeah.
It was Dave. That was my guess earlier. I think in the other podcast, I think someone had tied that together, but just try to shut you guys up. You know, so let's move on. Let's talk about the experience with the blue alien. Can you kind of fill us in on that, and then we'll go to the Nellis 94 one, and I've got a couple videos for that.
Yeah. The Nellis 1994 is the blue alien
Oh,
one
okay.
that I'm known for. So it's the kind of the same. So we'll knock out two birds with one stone. So like I said, after being excommunicated and they took my badge and I started doing the dirty work, um, I'm still having to do my day job, even though they're making me run these messed up missions. Um, then we're just going up range. But the previous week, what we're doing there is training air crews on how to survive in a technologically degraded environment. In other words, we're jamming their radios, their have-quick, everything that we can figure out to do to them that the enemy would is the environment that we had set up. And we do that we'd operate out of Black Mountain and Talicha Peak. Those are the two main areas that we did it because those are the highest elevations that you can get your antennas on to do your communications jamming and everything else. So that was what we did, but it would last for about 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes longer. And every 2 weeks we would change out the crews. So the previous crew actually was there at Black Mountain when this UFO flew by it. And it was recorded on the range cameras because when you're up there training air crews in a degraded environment, everything has to be recorded just in case somebody dies or there's a plane crash. They always want to review everything for flight safety and see if there was something they could do better. So everything's recorded. So they recorded this UFO going right by the same Black Mountain schoolhouses, which is what we called it. And the people from the previous week that worked with me on these exercises saw it that previous Friday. So this UFO comes onto the range and they're all excited when they come back into garrison. And some people were like, I don't know what that was. And other people were like, it's a UFO. Other people were like, I'm not sure. Maybe it's just some weird something from dreamland that they've got, you know. And they were just arguing back and forth. And some people didn't want to talk about it. So anyway, the following Mondays when I'm going up with my team, excuse me. And so we go up on the convoy. And usually if there's an event like that, the entire test range is closed because they would close it for like nuclear tests. And, you know, if there was a unexploded ordnance on one of the ranges, they would have to send a team in there and they would close down the whole thing because sometimes you get hung bombs on the wings and they would fall in different places in the desert. So I was kind of surprised later on after talking it through with folks that nobody closed the test range even after this UFO event. So either the people that were recording the event before it went into the public view on the news channel with George Knapp and those guys, they probably didn't tell anybody, is what I'm thinking. So anyway, we get up to the range, and there's a dirt road that's just after Fleur de Lis up in Beatty, Nevada, where we would go. And we turned right and started traveling into the test range. And there's a cantonment area where the video operators operate out of, kind of a few miles down the entrance, from the entrance. And the ranking guy, is a good friend of mine. He said, "Hey, we got to go view this video. They want us to come in from last week," because he had been there the previous week. He just so happened to be working cross shifts with people, because sometimes you do that. Sometimes, somebody's having a baby or somebody got sick. So I think he traded up with somebody to switch off. But anyway, he was there when that UFO came by. And now we're going to see this video the following week. So we go into the cantonment area and we go to the video operator's office. It's in this hut. And he made us all write our names down. There's about 10 to 15 of us all together. So there's 10 to 15 names on that list. And you also had to annotate whether you were there and saw the UFO or not. And then he showed everybody the UFO video after we wrote our names down. So whoever's got that list, they're going to be like making $1 million off that one piece of paper. So anyway, we all viewed all that stuff, and then as we're all exiting, I'm like one of the last ones out, and there's this lady and a gentleman on the other side of the office space, or the hut, and the lady gets up and she looks really nervous, and she grabs me by the arm and she's just like, "There's somebody on the range. Don't talk to them. Don't talk to them." And I was like, "Well, okay, thank you, strange lady. Not talk to anybody. Thank you very much." And so I left. We got back in the convoy, started traveling down, and within a mile or so, sure enough, there's an individual on the side of the road, and you can see him in the distance, and it looked like he was hailing us, but kind of in a weird way. His arms would kind of flop down by his sides, and then when he started running, it looked even stranger, because he didn't run like we do with our arms like this. They're kind of like flopping behind him, like kind of reminds me of that
Gumby.
Yeah, kind of like that, where he just, like, and on top of that, he was leaning way forward, like he was running against a hurricane wind.
Oh.
But then we were still approaching, and I could see that he had a blue tint to his skin, and the fact that he looked like he was going to, fall over face first anytime. I was like, holy crap, this guy is dying of hypothermia out here. And he must be very cold, because it was, this was October-ish, it gets really cold in the desert. And so we start to slow down. And yeah, he's got a set of military BDUs. The one thing that was really strange, he had his hat on. You don't have to wear a hat on the range, because if the wind blows it off, you'll never get it again. So anyway, he's wearing his hat, and I noticed how clean his uniform is. Another big no-no. You're in a very dirty environment, and this guy's wearing like his best outfit kind of thing. I'm thinking this guy is definitely out of place.
Yeah.
So about this time that all these things are going through my mind and all that, he's right at the corner of the vehicle I'm in. I'm in the lead vehicle with the ranking individual. I'm sitting right behind him, and there's two other people in the car. There's one guy in the front passenger seat, and there's a girl off to my right on the passenger side, in the bench seat that I'm sitting in. So I'm getting the door open as we're pulling up, and the guy in the front seat screams, "He's got no effing ears!" And I thought, good grief, this guy's dying, and you got to say something stupid like that. It's like, this guy could be, because I'm thinking in my head, he might be a burn victim or suffered some kind of an injury, and this guy's screaming about his ears. So I just thought it was insane.
N.H.I at all, were you?
No, I wasn't. I honestly thought I was saving somebody's life, and I was actually trying to get my field jacket off, because back then we had it was the older field jackets, not these new Gore-Tex ones that you get. But when you open them up, there's a liner on the inside. I was trying to open it up, and I was going to offer him my liner and drag him into the car and just get him warmed up, because I thought he was hypothermic. So I swing the door open, I step onto the roadway, I shut the door, and I look up and I go, holy shit, this is not a human,
Hitchhiker you planned on picking up.
Yep. I was like, what have I gotten myself into? it just stopped me dead in my tracks. And, I'm looking at him. I see the ears, but they're like just conformed to his head. They're both symmetric. They're not mutated. They're not burned. They look like natural ears, but they're just not sticking out. He's got no hair. He's got really big eyes. They come up like this. And they're like the corners were in the temples, that big. But you could see whites. There's whites around the very dark iris and pupil. I could barely see the difference between the pupil and the iris. And then he starts to talk to me, and it's in a language I have no idea what it is.
Is that verbally or in your mind?
Huh?
Is that verbally or in your mind?
Both at the same time. So
Oh, wow.
I can hear him speaking a language I don't know. However, the meaning of all the words he's telling me, I know it's like he's speaking my language, mentally, that is. Telepathically, I can tell exactly what every word means. And that's when I realized this is telepathic. I'm like, okay. So he's saying, my craft is damaged. I need to repair it. Do you happen to have any tritium that I can do that? And I'm thinking in my mind, does he mean titanium? Because that's the only thing I related it to. I'd never heard of tritium before. And I'm like, no, I don't have tritium. Do you mean titanium? He's like, no, that's not it. And I said, well, I pointed to Dreamland because you see the mountain range. It's like a little circle there in the middle of the test range. And that's where Groom Lake is. And when I pointed over there and suggested that, I got this wave of telepathic emotion from him of disgust. And he was like, I will never ask them for any help. They're murderers and barbarians. And I was like, okay. I was like, well, the only other thing that comes to my mind is I do take college class in town, and I have a physical geology teacher. Maybe he knows a metallurgist or something that's on staff at the college that could help you out. And I could tell he thought, oh, that's kind of a good idea. And he just doesn't say goodbye, doesn't do anything. He just turns off the side of the road back. And oh, by the way, and all this time when I was getting out of the car, I also saw his craft, and it was exactly what was in that UFO video that you can get on. You can see that online.
Want me to play that video for him real quick, or you want to wait on that?
No, you can show the video. I'd like to show you guys that because I want you guys to see how weird this thing is.
This was at Nellis, right?
Yes.
1994.
Yeah. And that little bar across the bottom is that's a tracking beam. It's trying to lock on to that craft. It's having trouble.
Yeah, can't get it really bad on this thing.
It's called the ram's head, right?
I don't know. I'm out of here. Oh, okay. What the hell is it? I don't even know what it is.
That was an extraordinary video. It's called the ram's head, correct?
Yeah, because well, the reason they do that is because the front part does look a bit like a canopy of like a Huey helicopter that's got the plexiglass or whatever. It's rounded, but instead of having the undercarriage having the landing skids, there's these two large ram's horn looking things that go from the very top of this canopy all the way down to the ground, and that's what it rested on the desert. And then at the very aft, where there should be like a long rotor.
I've got that video if you want the
Yeah.
3D rendition.
Yeah.
You want me to pull it up? Okay,
Yeah,
I'll bring
show
that up
that.
too.
And it's got this little egg-shaped pancake deal. Yeah, that's it. That black bit on the back there, that's actually part of the propulsion system. But the ram's horns, you can see, just go straight from the canopy down to the ground. And then that little bit bump out in the front part is where some stairs appear. And if well, the things that the video didn't show that I know of is, number one, the canopy opens up like a clamshell like that. It goes up just like that, and then you climb into the cockpit, and then it closes. And there's two seats in there, one for the pilot and one for a second passenger or whatever, a navigator or whoever. And then it closes. The other thing you can kind of see in the video, but it's difficult if you weren't there, but when this thing started operating after he got back into it, that little gap between the ram's horns and the canopy would kind of whoosh in like this mist, very thick mist. It would just poof, poof, like that, but you can't really see it too good on the video when it's in flight, but it only happens while it's in flight. The second thing that happened just on takeoff was that the whole skin seems to change color as well for some reason, and then it looked like white all when it was in flight. When it was fully lifted off the ground, it didn't oscillate colors at all. Only when it was resting on the ground and kind of like powering up, I guess. And so those are some of the things that I'd love to talk to somebody about. I've talked to some of the scientists as well, because when he asked me about the tritium and the part that was broken, telepathically he put like an image in my head. It's kind of like a Sears catalog. It just kind of described everything about it, and it's kind of like a little, how sometimes you see a schematic and things like that. That's what I have in my head. I had that in my head, that's what this part, I knew what it functioned as and everything else. And that's something that I've had scientists pick my brain over from time to time. And also,
can I ask a question real quick? For clarification, the being that was running, like he was running into the wind, you were worried about it, hypothermia. Was that the blue being?
Yes. To me, it's not like, some people like to think it's like this navy blue being. This guy had albino looking skin, but it had a definite blue tint to it. Okay. That's why I thought he was hypothermic, is because it was blue tinted skin, but it's his natural skin color. So yes, he is blue, but it's a very light blue, not a dark blue. So that's something that people sometimes ask me.
Subtle then.
Huh?
It was a little more subtle than, like
right.
navy blue or something like that, a little bit lighter.
Yeah, it almost looked normal, but not. You know what I mean? It was definitely like
blue tint to it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I definitely knew, just if it was a human, I was looking at somebody that was definitely hypothermic, because it was not normal for a human to look that blue.
Right.
So it definitely was. When I realized this was his normal hue of his skin and he wasn't hypothermic, yeah, I would say that, yes, he definitely had a blue tint to his skin that is part of his makeup, his biology.
You're like, give me my jacket back. I'm turned blue now.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, that's kind of how it goes. But yeah, but that was the encounter with the alien. I do have some flashbacks. I probably should get somebody to hypnotize me and pull it out of my memory. But I have a flashback of a star map that I produced for David Grush when he interviewed me, when he was working with, just before Arrow stood up. He was working with the UAP task force, and it was him and one other individual that interviewed me over this Nellis incident, which we were talking about on the Top Secret network.
Let's just pop that up real quick. This was the invitation that you got from Arrow right here. So here's the documentation to prove, that happened. Arrow's communication is right there. Anybody can see it for themselves. Correct. I'll remove that now. I just wanted to make sure people understood that you actually did And I've got some questions for you coming up along that line, but I
Sure.
wanted to make sure I got that out there up front.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, when David is asking me, all these additional questions, he actually during that interview made me realize that there's residue memory that somehow during this telepathic communication, part of him is still part of my memory banks somehow, and certain conditions brings it out, like the star map. When David asked me to produce the star map, and I sent it to him, he said, "Do you know what this constellation is?" I said, "No, I've never studied astronomy or anything." And he just said, "This is part of the Leo constellation." And I said, "Oh, that's nice to know." And then he said, "Can you tell me anything about the big red star that you indicated in that star map?" And at first I was like, "Well, no." And then all this flood of memory came back, and I started crying right there in the interview. And I'm like, "Yeah, that's the star this guy came from. That's where his homeworld was." And apparently in the ancient past, his homeworld was destroyed by that star, and his people had to colonize another planet that was close by. But it was a very sad day, kind of like you and I might remember the World Trade Centers going down, and it's a very depressing, sad day. Well, the same thing happened for them, because they had some of their people that were similarly like, "I don't want to leave. This is my home planet. I want to die here." But since they're a telepathic race of beings, they actually felt their fellow people dying when that star wiped them out, and it's a very sad day for them. And so
That's
that
gonna be awful.
yeah, well, I cried because when David asked me that, it caught me off guard, and that flood of memory just came right back at that instant, and it was kind of like a PTSD kind of flashback. It hit me, and it all came back with that flood of emotion. But that was from him. Honestly, that was from the guy, and that residue memory, I never even knew it was there until David asked me about it. And then all of a sudden I focused on the star for some reason, and poof, the memories just all flooded back. And I get those sometimes, just certain conditions. And I've since found out from other researchers that have talked to people like myself, they say that sometimes it can be cold or the smell of something very pungent that brings back the memories, because even though they could be suppressed by some of these N.H.I, they don't have all the same olfactory senses that we do. They smell differently, they hear differently, they see differently. And some of them breathe different types of air, I think, or survive in a different way or digest differently. So they don't know how to wipe that out from our memory. So what they found out was some of these researchers were like, when a certain kind of cold and biting wind, like that day at the Nellis test range, that cold and biting wind might have brought back a flood of memory for me, just like it would for somebody else. So that's kind of like how it felt during that interview with David Grush, is that he did something that triggered it, seemed to just be that focusing. But I definitely got the feeling that was where this individual was from, that they've colonized 2 or 3 other planets, from what I can feel inside me, that this is what is part of that memory, is that there's 3 other planets somewhere nearby. And again, I had no idea that there's any exoplanets there, but David said, "You realize that there are about that many exoplanets that we have recently discovered, but only within the past few years." And he said, he was like, "I'm very interested in that too, because we couldn't even see these exoplanets when you actually had the encounter. We didn't even know they existed." So that was kind of telling also. So there's all these little bits and pieces that I can't explain, but seem to corroborate things that I shouldn't know. Just like some other experiencers have that same experience, where they have a flood of memory and they shouldn't know something, but yet they do.
Wow. I want to put a shout out to Ray Hardy, and also to my segment producer, Allie Travis, for helping out with the podcast. Ray brought up the question about the blue being, and he put in brackets about the lady. Was he talking about, was there something else, or was it like the lady that you talked to that told you not to go talk to him? Was there a lady involved with that? I was kind of intrigued. I didn't know exactly where that came from. Was there a lady involved with that at all, or not? Because I was lining that up.
Well, yeah. In the Cantonment area, there was, I think, a person there, because she I think works with the range video cameras, because
Right.
the guy we talked to is just the video operator. He sits there at a computer terminal and watches the videos and flips through them. Whereas I think the lady that stopped me going out the door, along with the gentleman, they might be the ones that go from site to site to make sure that all of them are working correctly, or if there's a problem that they replace parts and do whatever it takes. Because like I said, for the Nellis test range, those cameras are very critical to flight safety and recording all of the exercises and the war games that we played out there, because people can die. So they like to record everything. So they have a very important job there. So I think
So that lady was a human being, though. In other words, she wasn't an
oh yeah,
alien.
yeah. She
Okay.
wasn't an alien at all. She just had, like, I think I recall her having sandy blonde hair or sandy brown hair.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's
Well,
just normal looking woman, just doing her job up there. A lot of the people up on range too, they live in the neighboring towns, like Beatty, Nevada, or Needles, and places like Pahrump, and they just drive on the range. That's what they do all week, because there's equipment up there to maintain all the time.
I've been over there a couple times now, and was there last July. And so when you talked about Tonopah and stuff like that, I mean, I stayed at the Clown Motel over there.
Yeah.
Supposed to be pretty creepy. It wasn't that creepy to me, but it was fun. It was fun to be able to go and see those places. So
Did you see some of the ghost towns?
I don't know if I saw the ghost town. Which one would that be?
It was in Death Valley. We went to Death Valley one day, and then there was like this turnoff that said there's a ghost town up this way. And we went up there, and that place was creepy. That was really creepy.
I had a panic attack when I got to Death Valley, because I meant to get gas, and I get out there and I got like a quarter tank, and I'm going, where would be the worst place on the planet to run out of gas? It's 110 degrees outside, or 112, whatever it was.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like, so
I
luckily they didn't have a gas station there.
Well, that day I nearly jumped out of my skin on the return trip, because it's so hot. It created pressure, and it made the gas needle go from full to empty like really fast.
Oh my goodness.
And I thought we blew a gasket and we were spilling gas out all over the road, and I was all upset. And when I got out there, I was like, oh no. And I popped the gas cap, and it literally flew out of my hand a few feet, because it was so packed with pressure. And then the gas gauge started looking right again. But I was like, thank goodness, But yeah, it was like you said, it just scared the heck out of me, because I was like in that mode where, oh my gosh, the worst case scenario just happened. We're losing our gas. We're going to get stuck out here. We're going to freaking die,
It is scary, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Two hottest places I've ever been in my life. I had a previous experience when I think it was on my honeymoon. No, maybe it was later, but we were going through Death Valley in the middle of the day at noon, and it was like 118 degrees or 116 degrees out there. And we stopped at this rest area and tried to put water over. Our car didn't have air conditioning, and it was miserable. The only thing that saved us on that trip is there was a store out in the middle of nowhere, and it had shakes. And I'm telling you what, that worked. That took care of it.
You're right.
Ray mentioned another thing as Red Team telecommunication operations. Was that the one you were talking about earlier, where they were assessing whether something's Chinese or Russian? It sounds like, if it is, I did want to get back to that just for a second, but when you were talking about the other technology, the N.H.I, it sounds like, well, we know Russia and China inside and out. Yes. When you got to this other stuff, that's where it all got compartmentalized, the stuff that they didn't recognize that was of a different technology. Is that an accurate assessment?
That's exactly right. Yes, there were definitely two groups in my brain. One was the exotic material. The other stuff was things that we could wrap our head around, because there was Russian or Chinese or some language that we could decipher. And you'd pick it up and you could see that's the on-off switch. This is an avionics pod. You could tell exactly what it was. But this exotic stuff, we were getting calls from scientists going, what the heck is going on here? I have no idea what this thing is. Does anybody have any notes? Nope, we can't give you any notes from any of your predecessors. You can't? I was like, no. It's like, okay, well, I'll give it my best shot. These guys were just very frustrated with this exotic material.
Wow.
So,
what do you think this was? What are we talking about? Are we talking about, was it strictly technological? Was it biological? Was it consciousness based? I mean, was it like nuts and bolts? Or because there's so much discussion about what these beings are. Would you say that they were physical, or I guess a better way of saying it, or were they more, I want to use the word spirit, but conscious based, whatever the word you want to use for it? Did you feel like the stuff you encountered was,
Yes.
like us physically, or was it something other?
I have had most of the ones where I saw a tangible being. They had physical form, physical weight, just like the Nordics that helped me in my childhood. I felt the guy's hand on my arm pulling me up, very strong. There was a very physical aspect to that. Looking at that craft in the desert with the blue being, yes, a physical craft. He was physically there. He physically lives in another part of our galaxy. That's what I believe, that he's left that with me, that this is where I'm from. My home is elsewhere. There are physical aspects to this. However, just like as we grow technologically, we may be able to transcend or teleport or do things where we can phase out physically and appear somewhere else. And then you've got all these people that are talking about, astral projection, spiritual realms and interdimensionality. Those, I think, are technically achievable. Because yes, I agree that I'm not the only experiencer out there.
Right.
I've had more tangible experiences. Others have not. Others have had very interdimensional. It's like the ones where I was being used for dirty work. Some of that felt very unreal. Like it was a nightmare. Like I was taken out of my body sometimes, and I was not physically there, but I was spiritually there. But I was also being led telepathically to do the things that I had to do, because I don't remember ever getting a mission brief. However, I knew exactly where to go, what the first types of things I needed to do there. But when I was in battle or in combat, that was all on me, and partially guided as well, but mostly me, when I was actually in combat with my team. And so there's a lot of these different aspects of my experience where, yeah, there's a very physical aspect, but I also touched on some of these non-tangibles that I can't explain how things have happened around me in my experience. I'll tell you an interesting story if we have time, but
Sure. Yeah.
I have a scientific friend who lives up in Belgium. His wife's a spiritual person, and he called me out of the blue while I was living in Maryland, and he just said, "My wife told me to call you." And I'm like, "Okay, am I in trouble?" He's like, "No, you're not in trouble." He's like, "My wife is asking me," because I hear her talking in Belgian in the background, asking him to relay something to me. He said, "My wife is asking me, tell me what you dreamt last night." And I'm like, "Really? Your wife wants me to tell her what I dreamt last night?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, it was really weird." He's like, "You sure you want to hear it?" And he's like, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I dreamt I was in the moon." He's like, "Really?" He said, "Go on." And he babbles something to his wife, and she gets excited. And then I just mentioned how I went down into this cavern on this path, and then I entered into a huge space where there's a bunch of different N.H.I in this dream that I had had. And then he interrupts me, and I could hear his wife just go, after he relayed what I just told him to her, and she's just going. And then he starts to translate it all to me. He says, "Okay," he said, "stop there. My wife is going to tell you what else you dreamt." And I thought, yeah, this is going to be good. So he relays it all to me, and it's actually everything else that happened in there. She told me what we spoke about in that big room with the N.H.I, because there was a lot of them arguing back and forth about whether they want to do one thing or another with the human race. And she told me all about the arguments that were in this dream that I had. And after that conversation, I was like, how does that happen? And he's like, telling me, "My wife said you were astral traveling with her last night, and she saw you." And I was like, whoa. So now that happened to me, that's when I'm kind of like, I went from these are all dreams to holy crap, what was that? Because it was a very vivid dream. And how could a person that lives halfway across the world have that kind of conversation where she finishes my dream and description thereof
Right.
if she actually was not there? Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you share a dream like that?
Yeah.
And
a lot of people don't get that confirmation. That's the sad part. You know,
right.
like, yeah. I've had something happen, and I don't even share it anymore. I'll be honest with you. I have a hard time believing it. So it's like, you know, I shared it on one podcast one time, but it really showed me that there is more out there than just a physical. I came into this thing nuts and bolts. That's what I was. I didn't want to hear about the spiritual stuff. I kind of, I laid that. I don't know if you know or not, I'm a pastor, but I came into this, this field of study, and I just pretty much laid aside all of my training and stuff. And I wanted to look at it purely from the evidence, and not be biased. If you think you're a hammer, I mean, everything you're looking at is going to be a nail, and you're going to be, you're going to be affected by it. So I didn't want that to happen. But I've had ghost encounters. I mean, I've had all kinds. I've had stuff that I don't know whether it was ghost or N.H.I. And so I think what you're talking about, I want to tell you straight up, Jason, I believe you. And I understand how difficult it is because, I don't get out like you do and do the stories. You tell your encounters and stuff, but I know how difficult it is for me. And being a pastor and stuff, most people respect me. Most people know, trust that I'm telling the truth. But even some of this stuff gets so weird and so out there that even though I experienced it myself, Jason, I have a hard time believing it. And so like, how's anybody else going to believe it? So, that's why it's good to have experiencers to talk to, other people that have gone through this kind of stuff.
Well, just to let you know, I understand I'm a man of faith myself. I'm a Christian. Mm-hmm. And when I entered into the program, it was just after I had my closest and most, I would say, in-depth experience with God in reading the Bible. I read through my Bible from front to back before I went into the program. And it rocked my world. And then after I went through the program, I reread the Bible. Mm-hmm. And I looked at it with new eyes because I was just reading the stories like we talked earlier about Abraham inviting these sons of God in. There's a reality there that people totally ignore when they're in the pulpit. Oh, they're only fluffy, cloudy beings that just show up and they poof. But they're not fairies. These are real things. These people came into Abraham's tent, ate lunch with him, and then blessed him with a baby. Yeah. And you can read that all the way through the Bible, all these different living beings. We are not the only thing that God created.
Even Jesus, after he resurrected, he ate fish, so there's something, it's not like spirit where you put your hand through it or, the other thing I want to make this clear, Jason, I am not a religious person. A lot of people will have a hard time wrapping their minds around that, but I'm not, I am a spiritual person. And I want to make that absolutely clear because I think religion is where the hatred comes from.
I do too.
And I'm all about love. In fact, if I've taken down what I believe in, I put it into a simple package, and it is to love God, love people. I don't know how you can go wrong doing that. So I'm not here to preach or promote, my faith or anything like that. But I want people to understand I am not that kind of pastor because usually it takes people a while to be able to figure it out. And I'll be having Sean Cahill on next week. And
cool.
So, he knew we have mutual friends. We kind of knew each other, but we wanted to have a conversation first, kind of get a feel for, because I was a pastor, like what's this guy going to be doing? Quoting verses every 5 seconds at me, which, I don't do. I'm a normal human being. I'm not here as a pastor. And I want everybody to know this. That's my other job, But but I want you to know that I believe you. I can't say I completely understand what you're going through because some of the stuff you've experienced, I mean, you've got to have PTSD from that, seeing that alien killed in front of you. We're going to get down to that a little bit later about, we have less than 2 hours because I don't get my clips if we get out of 2 hours, but there's some other questions I want to bring up about that. Do you ever, though, real quick, do you ever feel like aside from the encounters themselves, do you ever get a sense that you're being watched, that you're being observed? Like you see a car parked down the street that doesn't quite look right, or you're driving down the road and all of a sudden you make a left, this car makes a left, you make a right, they make a right. Do you ever that ever go on?
Yes, actually, I still get that today. Once you've felt what telepathy feels like, you know when this invisible hand kind of works on you, and it's very much like what people call about the voice of God, that quiet voice. It's just like that. It's very gentle, but you know it's not from you. It just it's like a wisdom that comes to you that you wouldn't come up with on your own. That's what I experienced with these things. But yeah, it's been following me around. They've been following me around. For some reason, they've been protecting me. And like I said before, that a lot of other experiences say the same thing, that when you have an encounter, it's meant to happen. And a lot of times it is in the family, and a lot of times it's lifelong. And I definitely feel that's the case with me. That even from a very small child, I've been connected with them for some reason. I used to think that the only reason that I needed to live was to help my dad through alcoholism. But I'm finding that there's other things that I'm helping people with. And who's to say that these smallest little things of kindness that we do each day don't have a huge impact later on, you know? And I think there's some meaning in that I don't see and most other people don't realize. And that's why it's so important we're doing what we can for each other each day. And that's kind of how I feel about the whole thing. And the telepathic communication and the calmness of this individual I met in the desert as well. That's what he believes, that there's a purpose for every life. We're all unique, and it's for a reason. It's kind of what I think he was trying to relay to me, is that you're no different than me when it comes to this, but you are here for a reason. There's a purpose in your life, just like there's a purpose in Dale's life. You know, everybody has that purpose. You just have to connect to it, realize what you're good at. That's what your gift is. That's what you should be using, and stop playing with all these minor distractions.
Don't waste your life. I mean, that's the thing, that when you get older, you start looking back and you go, well, what did I do with my life? And I can say this, my dad was an alcoholic too. And, I quit school in 9th grade. I was working, but I was going nowhere. And then all of a sudden my life turned around, and I've been able to go and accomplish a few things. And it was really, luck, I guess, maybe guidance as well, that I didn't end up like my dad, because my dad died like at 49 years old of alcohol poisoning, whatever you want to call it. Just destroyed his body and stuff. And that very much could have been me. But the point I'm trying to make is we all have choices. We have a purpose, but we have to choose that purpose. We have to choose to follow that purpose, because I believe anyway, we have free will. And like I said, I'd see that I had a fork in the road, and if I hadn't taken that fork, then I probably would have ended up just like my dad, which would have been a wasted life.
That's a good point to make. That's a very excellent point to make, Dale, because I'd say that the one thing that I found a big difference in that telepathic communication was the clarity of thought in his communication to me, whereas mine was very distracted. I was running between running in fear to, I'm going to help this guy, to what the heck's going on here. And it was very distracting probably for him. He actually had to look away a few times, like, holy crap, here he goes again. But that's kind of how we are. But think about it though, how different you and I would be if we grew up like he did, having to keep your thoughts even in control, because you could be there in the middle of your living room with your mom and dad, and they could actually hear what you're thinking. You're not going to be able to lie like we do now. You're not going to be able to get away with breaking the lamp and getting away with a lie about it. You're not going to be able to get away with a lot of stuff, because you're going to be controlled. And that's what I felt in him, was that not only did it do that, but as he matured, he became a kinder, more gentle creature, more peaceful, more understanding, more patient than I ever could be. All of those are attributes that I think ultimately that's what they are waiting to engage with us on, is once we reach a plateau of some kind of kindness.
That kind of goes with my next question is, and I want to make this clear that we're talking about multi-species here. Yes. And so we can't put them all in the same box. But if you had to sum it up as an overall picture, understanding that there are some exceptions, what do you think their intentions are?
I think the intentions are good, that they are protective of us, and they are willing to even battle the species that are not friendly and keep them off our backs until we have been given a full chance at becoming who we should be as a,
Right.
as a race, as a human race here on the planet. I think that's what they're waiting to do, and they're protecting us for. And it also goes along with my faith in the Bible too, because that's kind of what God says. I'm waiting it out until everybody's had a chance, you know, and then the end's going to come. But I do believe also, though, that they, just like all the ancient texts say, in the future, in our future, it's not going to be our own free will that we're going to make it to the next level. There's going to be an intervention of some kind by them, because we're just not going to get enough consensus. I think there's a group of people that are already there, but the world as a whole is not going to be there when this intervention happens. And they're just going to take, just like it says in the Bible, they're going to harvest the ones that are good to go, and the ones that don't make it are going to be stuck with their, I don't know, carnal thinking or whatever is holding them back, you know. So,
That leads to the, as far as the government trying to, I mean, it's a great segue into the next question. With the government trying to keep everything from us, do you think it's all about national security? Are they worried about us panicking? Or do you think the reason they're trying to keep this information from us, that it's really much deeper than either one of those two?
I know that they do harp on the narrative that it's going to cause panic. I don't believe that's true. I think about 80 to 90% of people already believe that we're not alone. I think the thing that the government is struggling with is the fact that, how do we segregate out the N.H.I presence from the weaponization of the technology? And then the real problem is, oh, yeah, we did screw up a lot too. We killed some of these creatures. We killed some Americans. We've done some really horrible things. Therefore, we can't ever say what we did. I think that's the big problem, is how do I think they wish that they could have amnesty and not be held accountable for what has happened. And I think that the N.H.I also are mainly here to help. However, they have their own motivations too. Some of them might come from, like, from what I understand, from the ones that were talked about in the program, the tall whites are overpopulators and they eat up resources like all get out. And they're here because they need our resources to kind of refuel, and take off, as Mr. Hall has said, and that we built them a spaceport for that. That's what Mr. Hall claims from his contact with the tall whites. Then you have the grays, very scientific. Apparently, they give themselves, their entire body, to scientific means up into even death. They find that an honorable thing in their society, but they also have this sort of a hive mind, like ants or bees. They're like a colony of where everybody knows their place. They know what they're there for. They have a duty or a particular thing they do within that hive, and they just take care of business. And that's why even in the program, they're kind of used as like a hive to go in there and clean up, and just like, an ant colony would. Like if a rainy day came and it destroyed some of their tunnels, the worker ant goes in there and cleans that up. Not the other ones, not the queen, but the worker ants do, So they're very much like that. So they have very different reasons for being here and different motivations. And then you think about the kinds of experiences that we're hearing about from these grays, and they are very much like that, where they don't really have any moral like or dislike about dealing and testing our bodies while we're in their ships. They poke, they prod us. They, even in some cases, they say they're trying to find a way to take our soul out of our physical body and put it in another. They are not scared of that kind of testing, but it's always the grays that seems to be involved in that. And that seems to be exactly what, Mr. Hall was saying.
Jason, that sounds absolutely bizarre until you accept the principle of past lives. once you accept the principle of past lives, then you have to go, okay, it's the soul that is separate. This body is just a tent and stuff. So for the soul to go somewhere else, it's, you know, it's a little bit easier to digest that way. But I don't think a lot of people think of that, you know, or at least people that are not in our community, when they hear something like that, it might sound absolutely bizarre. But, you know, once you accept the fact, and I said, I didn't used to believe in past lives. It wasn't until
I didn't either.
Yeah, a little bit over a year ago. But I've had some things happen. Once you see it, or once you hear and you have enough evidence, because I'm a skeptic by nature and stuff, but you know, so but even as a Christian, you know, even as a person who's a person of faith, I think in most religions, that they believe that there's a soul, there's a spirit, there's something that's in us, and whatever it is, I mean, it lives beyond our bodies. Our bodies are just tents. These are just the things. And so that's why I said it's not a hard thing to conceive. I don't know how they have the authority to do that, but I can see how it could happen, you know, and stuff. And one of the things that helps me is, you know, first of all, believing that we have a spirit that's separate from our bodies. When my mom died about 3 weeks ago.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, thank you. I want to share this one quick story because I want to honor my mom.
Okay.
About 4 or 5 days after she died, I was talking to a friend on the phone and about my mom, and she was talking about how her mom would visit her sometimes in her house. And so her husband lost his keys. John lost his keys, and they looked all over the place. Couldn't find the keys anywhere. And so she said, I finally said, Mom, can you help us find the keys? And her mom told her that the keys were in the garbage. And so they went over to the garbage. Sure enough, the keys were in there, but not just the keys, but also the guy's wallet, her husband John's wallet. The cat had knocked him over into the garbage, and it's like that was a good catch. And so, you know, I believe this person. They're an honest person. So my wife lost our truck key, and I told her, well, get a flashlight, go out and look in the truck. Maybe it's set on the seat or something like that. And I started looking around the kitchen, couldn't find it. She came in and looked in the back area by the back door and back porch. And then I went over there and went to the back porch thinking maybe she had left the keys there when she took the dogs out, and didn't find them. Went in the kitchen, went through the cupboards, couldn't find it there. Then I finally thought, well, maybe she used the bathroom. And so I went to the bathroom, and while I was in there looking, and they weren't there, by the way, I remembered what my friend had told me about her mom.
No, okay. Yeah.
God is my witness. This is an absolute true story. I said, Mom, and I like half-heartedly, half-heartedly. I said, Mom, can you help me find the keys? And God is my witness. I opened the doors, and it's almost like they jumped out at me. They were sitting on a box just on the other side of the door.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
If I found those 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later, I'd say, oh, that was just a coincidence. But the fact I had just asked, opened the door, and boom,
there it was.
And, and it was, to me, it isn't so much about the keys as it is the comfort of knowing that my mom was there.
Right.
That's
actually, yeah. And I could tell you, just to reaffirm, that this stuff does kind of come from all kinds of different places, because you remember the story about Elijah, in the Bible. Yeah. And then later on, John the Baptist. And I think it was Jesus said that the spirit of Elijah was in John the Baptist, and that people just didn't know it.
Well, people were asking that question.
Right. And again, it kind of goes into the conversation that you're discussing, is that there's this other self that is timeless and is using, just like the Bible says, a vessel to reside in. And that vessel dies from time to time, but then there's a part of us that lives on. And I think that's the thing that's most precious to, maybe the N.H.I and to God. And, that's the real thing, is that we're actually preparing for that life. And maybe this is just a training camp. Who knows? But those are some of the thoughts. I've had similar thoughts to yours. But I totally believe what you're saying about that, because I've had similar.
And what you said right there, that is, if I was going to say, somebody said, well, where in the Bible does it talk about past lives? That's exactly, because Jesus asked the question, who do people say that I am? And some people were saying Elijah, others were saying John the Baptist. And the crazy thing about John the Baptist, which is what you added a little insight into it as well, John the Baptist was older than Jesus. So, you
Yes.
know, how
Well,
could Jesus be him? And he had died, not that long ago. But to me, that's, if you want to look at it, the Bible doesn't talk about other lives and stuff like that.
no, they
But
don't.
that's clear that the people believed in past lives.
Well, that was what that's what separated the Sadducees from the Pharisees. Is one of them believed in resurrection,
And the
the
other
other
one,
one
the
did not.
Sadducees did not.
That's right.
We call them sad, you see, because they don't believe in life after death.
Correct.
But you're absolutely right on that. So as we talk about N.H.I, are they here to prepare us for something, or are we just collateral participants? I mean, how do you make sense of this, Jason?
I would say that there's a hierarchy of how close they are to the higher levels of intelligence in this universe or this reality. I would say that I've touched on some of them that are pretty high up there, and they're more protective. I don't think I've ever heard them being utilized inside the legacy program. The only ones that I've heard of in the legacy program are the Greys, the Tall Whites, the Reptilians, and the Nordics. Okay. And the Nordics really don't have a lot to do at all with any of that. And all the other races are not that far ahead of us. They're maybe 100 or 1,000 years ahead of us, but attainable technology to us, honestly. And I think that any race that is part of a governmental program here on planet Earth is also a developing intelligent life form. And that there are others that are not interested in that sort of thing because they are more spiritual, perhaps, and they are timeless or eternal beings that fall into the interdimensional realms and things like this that we talked about earlier. And yes, so I would say that the agenda for the ones in the legacy program are to help us with technology, but not to give us weapon systems. And I think early on in the legacy program, they found out that we were just horrible people. And I think after a century of working with the N.H.I in that legacy program, I think the N.H.I have leveraged a degree of control and may actually be controlling the retrievals now, since even I was in there in the 90s.
It's not something they wanted originally, but they've kind of been forced into that because we're not acting the way that we should be acting, correct?
Correct. I mean, it would be retrieving craft would be of mutual interest to both us and them.
Right.
Because they get to save their biologics or their people from being murdered, as they were back in the 90s, as obviously they were doing, and may still be doing, but I doubt if they are. I think that's a part where they have managed and controlled, and they have maybe bartered a deal. And I think that this is where the triangular craft that we have that are hybrids craft, right. But there are some triangular craft that are definitely N.H.I only. But we do have a version of that helps with the retrievals. And they gave that to us so that we could be on site first. But we always have to have an ambassador from themselves also present to make sure there's no stupidity when it comes to the retrieval, like stealing tech that we shouldn't have or destroying bodies and killing. So I think that may be what has evolved over this past century since we've worked with them for so long now.
Okay. Well, I want to move on. We're getting close to running out of time, and I wanted to hit the whistleblower stuff real quick. And I wanted to start by asking you, what was that internal battle when you were trying to decide whether to come, especially, I mean, I can't imagine having a gun put to your head or basically telling you kill this, well, it turned out to be N.H.I, but this person, or we're going to kill you, so walk us through how you finally got to the point that you said, you know what, I don't care if I live, I don't care if I die, I'm going to do the right thing. How did you get there?
Well, it was kind of a triggering thing. I think it was in Indonesia or Malaysia or something. There was a retrieval, or there was a triangular craft being used. And people described military people coming and going outside of the vehicle of this craft. And they were loading drugs and things like that. And it looked like maybe even human trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what really prompted me to think about it all again. And yeah, the nasty experiences played a part. that I knew that they'd done bad things to me as well as others. And I knew that it wasn't all of the program. It was just a certain area of the program that's really nasty. Because people like Hal Puthoff would be just interested in the sciences kind of thing, and not interested in, who shot who during the retrieval. So all those things played a part. And the other thing that happened kind of simultaneously was that I fell onto the network on the top secret computers on the NSA net, or on JWICS rather, and that's where I started reading through some of the UFO experiences and videos that were coming in from our own military drones and aircraft. And I was part of the reviewing audience. I was not part of the UAP task force, but we were working with them on these videos to determine whether they were, something that was just an aberration of the camera, or if it was a real, I don't know what this is. And yeah, I got to do that alongside that. And that's where I started, relaying some of my experience in some of the blogging that was going on. And that's when David Grush actually started to talk to me. And that's when I realized, yeah, this is probably, I probably need to come and talk to the government about this. Because after talking to David, and he said that he'd interviewed a lot of people like me, he said, "You're not the only one that says this stuff to me." And I thought, well, if it's not just me and everybody else thinks there's some fraud, waste, and abuse going on, somebody has to come forward. And I felt a very strong compunction at that point to come forward. And that's what I did. And I did it on my own dime. I flew all the way in from Hawaii to Washington, D.C. To do that.
Yeah. That's a lot of them. I know Lou and everybody else, the same thing. Everybody, Mario Woods, they all we're told if you can come and testify, but it's on your dime. Doesn't matter how important your testimony is, you're going to pay for it. Hey, let me go ahead and read something. And then I want to follow up with a question. Okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be about Arrow and also about Congress. I'll set the stage for that. It says August 13th, 2025, Lou Elizondo, after Representative Luna criticized Lou and others on Joe Rogan for not being at a SCIF, says this. After several visits to DC at the request of members of Congress at my own expense, isn't that what you just said?
Yep.
We were given cancellations at the last minute. After coming back home again, I made it clear that the last time that I had a pre-existing commitment, I was given 3 days notice and no guarantees while having committed to speaking in Oregon. And he was talking about the McMinnville UFO festival. I saw him there. In fact, he bought me a pass. Mm-hmm. Luna knows the truth, and we have the emails to prove it. I will chalk this up to her not being informed by her staff and an innocent mistake. And then he says this, I hope. He says, otherwise, let this be a lesson to future whistleblowers who want congressional protections. This is all about media attention and less about truth. I hope this is not the case. So what I want to ask is, I wanted to set that up, but you went to Arrow.
Yeah.
How did that go? And then you also went to Congress, and I believe you spoke probably behind closed doors, I'm imagining, for about 6 hours.
Yes.
And so walk us through that. I mean, how do you feel about it after talking to Arrow? What was your impression? And then follow that up with, tell us what, how you felt about Congress and whether they were, whether they can be trusted, whether they're doing anything, or is it just a show?
Yeah, well, it was actually November, December of 2022 when I came to Congress, and then I interviewed with Arrow in 2023 in late January. And then I went to the ICIG a month or so later. So that was the proper sequence. So I'll go through the congressional one. Like I said, I had some conversations that led all through 2022 with a staff member that was interested in having me come. And then by October, we firmed up the times, and they got me a date and said, can you be here? And I said, yes. So I booked my hotel and got my flights, showed up where they told me to. They ushered me into their office spaces in the SCIF. I talked to the Senate side first, and their SCIF. So I sat down with them and all the staff committee members from all the different, armed forces, you name it, the intelligence oversight folks, everybody was in the room. And that first conversation was just to kind of see if they wanted me to go to the House side later on that afternoon. So I spent about 3 hours there with them. I had 10 different talking points that I never got through because they were just like, wait, you just said what? And then we'd divert. So we got through quite a lot of different things, but I never got through my whole 10 points in either the House or the Senate side. So anyway, I testified. I told them that, time's critical. We need to get this done while there's still an impetus here in Congress to do this. We do need to talk more in depth. I even talked to them about some of the first NDAA language, and I told them it needs to be much stronger, or it needs to be stronger, and they did so. And even now, I can still see there's parts of it that need to be worked on as well. And so I'm hoping that continues to be an initiative, and that seems to be what Burleson and the rest of the guys are saying too, is there's a re-sparking of the fire to get that done, and I'm very proud to say that that'd be really awesome if they would. I don't fully agree with it. It's just media, like Lou Elizondo said, that it might be media interest. I don't think it's so much that. It's just, and this became evident when they took me over by that underground train to the House side. I went to the House side, got in the SCIF, and that was much more like, you need to tell us the stuff that we can actually act on. We need names, places, exacting details, because they have to put money to the investigation. So they're very interested as to, is this solid evidence that we can move on? And that's kind of the theme that I got from them that I didn't get right away when I came to speak to both the Senate and the House side. It was only when I got to the House that I realized that that's really what people have to do when they come to speak, is that they have to realize that they have to put money to this. So it's not so much about the media. It's sometimes they know that they have to fight with all their other constituents on Capitol Hill
They
and
got other
convince
things
them,
to do as well.
that this is not a waste of your time. It's not a waste of money. This is something we need to do. So I think it's a lot to do with that as well. And I do believe that, maybe Luna did, one of her staff members just didn't update her on what happened with the cancellation with Lou, because that does happen. I hate to say it.
Let me ask a question though, Jason, because this is the rub. This is where whistleblowers often get criticized, because the very thing you just brought up, a lot of whistleblowers will not cross that line because of the NDA. Now, did you keep to your NDA? DOPSR, did you get DOPSR approved, or how were you authorized to say what you said? And did you cross any lines? Because that is the issue, is when these whistleblowers go, like you and others, David Grush, they go in, their hands are tied because the very information that the politicians need, the places, the names, the dates, all this stuff, they can't give it. And so I can only, I'll sympathize with Congress on that side, because if you want me to do something, you've got to give me some information. You've got to give me something I can go after. And that is, I think, the frustration for everybody around on both sides, on Congress and the whistleblowers, because you don't want to go to prison. You don't want to spend the rest of your life in prison or go to jail. Other people say, well, yeah, you should just do it. Well, you know what, if that was you having to make that decision, you might not feel the same way. If you got a family, you got kids, you got a life, you don't want to lose it. You don't want to lose your job or your business or whatever. But that is the difficulty, right, Jason?
It is. And I told the Senate and the House both that my NDA had expired. The one I signed up for was only
so it
for
wasn't
30,
lifelong.
was for 30 years long.
Mm-hmm.
I think they upped it to 50 years after I got out.
Oh, wow.
But I think the feeling was that after 30 years, about every 10 years, they make a breakthrough on the technologies that I was exposed to. So 30 years should be a really safe time frame for me not to have to do that. Now, if I was still in the program, I'd still have to abide by my NDA, because I'd still be active. And that 30 years, every year you're in there, it pushes and pushes and pushes.
Okay.
further and further into your life. So
Right.
yeah, the NDAs are very, very difficult to deal with when you're under a 50-year onus to discuss things. And I think that's why Hal has, like people like Hal Puthoff have had to wait so long.
Right.
It's because they were actively in the program for that much longer, you know.
Danny D asked a question, and since we're running low on time, if you could stand before President Trump and brief him, what would you tell him?
I would tell him, I know you know what I know, but I'm going to tell you some things that you perhaps didn't think of that other people have probably whitewashed about the reality of what's really going on. It's not just the program that you're being told to hush hush about, Mr. President. It is also about the reality of these beings, and not all of them like what's going on in that program. And I would proceed then to tell him why I think that, and give him examples, just like I've done during this interview, as to these are the things I got exposed to in my experience, and here's why I think that we need to at least come clean on the fact that we are not alone. Because if you can get rid of that lie that we're the only thing going in this universe, at least then you can leave the weaponization and all the technologies as classified, but then you can talk more openly about the reality of all the things that may have led to some people having to die.
Right. Well, let me ask about something. Can you kind of fill us in about the firsthand fund and what that's all about? Is I got that off of a note from Ray, I think it was.
I think they shut that down because I got such flack. But Jeff Nusatelli actually started another fund, and they've got some thousands of dollars in there that I would prefer that if anybody wants to contribute, give to Jeff Nusatelli's. He's another whistleblower, and he set up this fund, but give to that because it does the same exact thing that the firsthand fund was designed to do.
Do you know what the name of that fund is off the top of your head?
No, I don't. I'd have to go back in there.
He was one of the witnesses in the whistleblowers in the last hearing. So
correct. Yeah.
I'm sure if you people look up his name to be able to figure that out. Well, the reason I brought that up is one of my pet peeves, and a friend of mine has created a whole chart over it, and that is that a lot of times experiencers are not getting the help they need. And I realize that one's more of a financial side, but you and I both know that there is an emotional component to this. You're talking about PTSD, and my friend Allie Travis is the one, my segment producer. She's created a chart that absolutely shows that when experiencers come out, there's group A, which is your family members, your pastor, whatever. They don't know how to help you. They can love you and everything else, but then you got group B, which is people who you think want to help you. They're more than open. It's like a podcast like mine, or like someone else's. Well, yeah, sure, I'd love to have you on. And I've been there. Trust me. I felt like I got gutted on one of the podcasts I did. But it's like, okay, you're over, it's done. And there's no follow-up. There's no one saying, well, Jason, how are you doing? How are you holding up? And so really what we need is to get to group C, and in group B, what happens is the experiencers get re-victimized all over again. So we need a group C, which I have an experiencer group, which would fall in that category. We need to come around and get some kind of counseling for them, because this is, PTSD is what it is. The world never looks the same after you realize that this box that science and religion and the schools have told us about, it doesn't exist. So that's the reason I brought it up, is I really think we need to have something in place to help experiencers, because there's a lot of times they feel completely alone, and sometimes they feel abandoned, and then they've got all this pain, and sometimes it's just, even if their experience wasn't bad, it's so mind altering that, I'm going to have Sean on next week, and we're going to talk about some of that, and you go through this existential crisis of trying to figure out what is life, what is it all about, especially trying to integrate your experiences into it. I want to give you a chance. Is there a question you wished I'd asked that I didn't? And we'll make that our last question. Something that you think that you really want people to know that maybe I didn't think of the question.
Yeah, and it's something I'm pushing for now stronger than I did before, and it's because I'm willing to now engage with the public, because I think we're done with the shiny penny part of it.
Right.
I think at least the people that are ready to move on to the next phase are ready, truly ready. As strange as that world may seem. And this is what it is, all balled up into one little thing, and that is, folks, it's not just the little green men and the things that they fly around in. That is fascinating in and of its own. I get that. But they represent a manufacturing plant that can mass produce these vehicles. That also speaks of a civilization that exists that we don't know or have not visited or have little knowledge of. They've been here for millennia, thousands and thousands of years. They know us. Okay. There's a reason that they are aloof. I can't put my finger on everything other than the fact that the things that we've talked about is that we're just not ready. I think that some of them are trying to help. And that all being wrapped up in one thing is that we have got to really think about our mindset. If we are being watched for thousands of years by these beings and they're still holding back, what does that mean for mankind? That's what I want people to understand. That's because we are not doing something that they want us to be. And I don't think they're coercing us into that. I think they're trying to promote us into that, so we can become our own unique species, just as they are, all unique, all different, all beautiful in God's eyes. They want to see us become who we're meant to be, but we're just not there.
Yeah. Well, it kind of reminds me, and like I said, this is a theory. I don't know if there's any archaeological evidence to support it or not, but there are those that speculate that we run in cycles as a civilization, that we get better, more smarter and more intelligent, and then we basically destroy ourselves and we go back down to ground zero and we start. And in what you're describing, if that is true, if that theory is correct, is that maybe they're alongside trying to help us, but not interfering so much as to make our decisions for us. And ultimately what it comes down to is we've got to decide what kind of a species we're going to be. Are we going to be a violent species, or are we going to be a loving species?
Yeah.
Because right now we're both. But I think for us to ever succeed, to ever elevate to where they are, the violent tendencies have to go. We have to figure out a way to get rid of those and understand the motivation, what makes us that way.
You just made me remember another part of that incident where that guy shot that alien in front of me in that prison cell. And when he was passing away in my arms, telepathically, he felt sorry for me.
Wow.
He was the one dying, but he felt sorry for me and us as humans. Think about that, folks. Honestly,
Right.
Think about that deal. Why would he feel that way? He was like disappointed for us that we're not who we should be, is what he was really relaying to me, is that you could be so much more. It's like you don't have any idea what you're capable of, is what he was kind of telling me.
Yeah. It's just like there's so much more and you have no idea because you're settling for this and there's so much more out there. Right?
Yes.
All right. Well, I'm going to close the sermon off. I want to make the sermon, excuse me, bad habit, the podcast out, because we're right up against it right now. But I just want to say, Jason, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm going to pull you down and pull you out and close that right now.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Dale. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I just want to thank everyone for being here. What an incredible interview. I can't believe it. There was so much in there and so much to learn from it. And I really hope you enjoyed it. And just let me ask you one more time, if you haven't done it already, help the channel out, subscribe, hit that like button, and make sure you hit the share button. Next week, exactly a week from today, it'll be at the same time, I'll be having Sean Cahill on, and that's going to be another incredible interview. And so be blessed, my friends.
This is the future.